The night before I was supposed to become Mrs. Ethan Reed, I returned to his mother's townhouse for one forgotten shawl, and the voices behind her half-closed kitchen door saved my entire life. I had already driven 10 blocks away from Vivienne Reed's Beacon Hill townhouse when I realized the blue cashmere shawl was not on the passenger seat. For any other coat, I might have kept driving. I was tired, my dress shoes were pinching, and the next morning was supposed to begin with hairspray, makeup brushes, and bridesmaids asking me how it felt to be minutes from forever. But that shawl was not fabric to me. It was the last thing Mother had finished before cancer stole the strength from her hands. She had embroidered 3 tiny silver stars along the edge and told me, one for courage, one for dignity, and one for the door you choose yourself. So I turned the car around. Boston wind scraped down the street as I pulled back in front of the townhouse. Vivienne's windows glowed gold against the dark brick. I remember thinking the house looked warm, almost kind, as if it were waiting to welcome me into a family. That was the lie beautiful houses tell from the outside. I parked badly, left the engine ticking, and hurried up the stone steps. My finger was almost on the bell when I heard Vivienne laughing inside, not her polite dinner laugh. Not the sweet, controlled laugh she used when she called me darling and adjusted my collar in public. This laugh was sharp, relaxed, and poisonous. She finally left, Vivienne said. Thank God. I thought I would have to keep smiling until my face cracked. My hand froze inches from the doorbell. Then Ethan's sister Clara answered. Mom, you deserve an award. The way you held her hands and called her family, I nearly choked on my wine. I stood there with my breath trapped in my throat. A rational person might have knocked. A softer version of me might have walked away and pretended I had not heard. But something about my mother's missing shawl, something about those 3 silver stars, held me in place. Have you ever heard one sentence and felt your entire past rearrange itself? Vivienne sighed dramatically. 5 years of patience, Clara. 5 years of pretending that girl was charming, when the only charming thing about her is the Seaport condo and that trust account her mother left behind. The step beneath me seemed to tilt. Clara giggled. After tomorrow, Ethan can finally talk her into adding him to the deed. Once his name is on it, we refinance, clear his startup debt, and get my design studio funded. Easy, Vivienne replied. Exactly. And if she resists, we pressure her in front of everyone. She hates scenes. Girls with dead mothers always cling to approval. She will fold. That was the moment love did not die slowly. It snapped clean. I did not cry. I did not scream. My body went cold, but my mind became frighteningly clear. I opened my purse with fingers that no longer felt attached to me, pulled out my phone, and started recording. I crouched beside the door, pressing the microphone near the bottom gap like a woman gathering evidence at the scene of her own funeral. Inside, Vivienne continued. Make sure she drinks at the reception. Not too much. Just enough that she gets emotional during the toast. If she cries about her mother, Ethan can promise to protect her. Then we introduce the deed conversation during brunch next week. Clara laughed again. You are evil. No, Vivienne said. I am practical. Practical. That was what they called greed when it wore pearls. I recorded 6 minutes. 6 minutes of them discussing my condo, my savings, my late mother, my fear of disappointing people, and the way Ethan had almost softened when I refused to put his name on the property before the wedding. Almost softened. So he knew. My fiancé knew enough to be tested by decency, and he had failed quietly behind my back. When the conversation shifted to flowers and photographer arrival times, I stopped recording. I rose slowly. My knees ached from crouching on the cold stone. I stared at the door, realizing my shawl was still inside, probably folded over a chair, innocent and warm, in a house that had never loved me. For 1 second, I almost knocked anyway. Then I heard my mother's voice in my memory. The door you choose yourself. I chose the sidewalk. I walked back to my car without the shawl. The engine was still running. My hands shook only after I locked the doors. Through the windshield, Vivienne's townhouse looked exactly the same. But I knew I would never again mistake lighted windows for warmth. My phone buzzed before I pulled away. Ethan. Did you get home? He asked when I answered. His voice was tender, sleepy, familiar. That voice had said good morning beside me. That voice had promised me children, holidays, and a kitchen with basil on the windowsill. I'm on my way, I said. You sound strange. I forgot my shawl. Oh, just get it tomorrow. Mom will bring it. Will she? He paused. A tiny pause, but after hearing his mother, I understood pauses differently. Of course. Why wouldn't she? No reason. Big day tomorrow, he said softly. Try to sleep, Maya. I love you. I looked at the townhouse one last time. Do you? He laughed lightly. Pre-wedding nerves? Something like that. I ended the call before he could say anything else. The drive back to my apartment in South Boston felt longer than any road I had ever taken. Streetlights blurred across the windshield. A bride should have been rehearsing vows in her head. I was replaying evidence. Vivienne's voice. Clara's laugh. The words trust account, deed, refinance, fold. Every syllable landed with a heavy, permanent sound. My apartment was small, too small for the wedding dress hanging in the corner like a white ghost. The dress was expensive, ridiculous, beautiful. My mother had seen a photo of it from her hospital bed and whispered, "That one makes you look like yourself." I had bought it with overtime pay and tears. Now it looked less like a dream and more like a costume for a role I had almost been tricked into playing. I sat on the floor under the dress and played the recording once. Then again. Then a third time. Not because I wanted to hurt myself, but because doubt is a dangerous negotiator. I needed to make sure doubt had nothing left to bargain with. At 2:11 in the morning, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside were the documents I had been too sentimental to review before marriage: the condo deed, mortgage papers, bank records, my mother's estate file, and a sealed envelope addressed in her handwriting. I had never opened it because I thought grief had already taken enough from me. Tonight, I opened it. Maya, my mother had written, "Love is not supposed to make you smaller. If you ever feel pressured to hand over what protects you, pause. Anyone who loves you will respect the pause." I pressed the paper to my chest. The room was silent except for the radiator clicking and the city humming outside. She had known. Not details, maybe. Not Vivienne's exact plan. But mothers see shadows daughters explain away as weather. At 5:30 a.m., I stopped trying to sleep. I showered, pinned my hair into a clean knot, and put on a navy suit instead of my bridal robe. The woman in the mirror did not look like a bride. She looked like someone arriving early to negotiate a hostile merger. My first call was to Rosalie Finch, my mother's oldest friend and a litigation attorney with a voice that could make bankers sit straighter. She answered on the third ring. "Maya, it is barely dawn. I'm canceling my wedding." Silence. Then sheets rustled. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Are you certain?" "I have a recording." Her voice changed from aunt to attorney in one breath. "Do not send it to anyone yet. Do not answer emotional calls. Do not meet any Reed alone. I am coming over, Rosalie. Yes? I need to protect the condo and my mother's money." She said, "Then today is not a wedding day. Today is a containment day." At 6:22, I texted Ethan. "The wedding is canceled. We are not getting married. Do not come to my apartment. All communication will go through counsel." I stared at the message for 3 seconds, then sent it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then my phone became a living thing. Ethan called. Vivienne called. Clara called. Ethan again. His father. A cousin whose name I barely remembered. Texts arrived in frantic bursts. "What happened? Are you joking? Maya, answer me. Do you know what this will cost? You are humiliating us. Please do not do this today." Not one message asked whether I was hurt. That confirmed what the recording had already proved. I turned the phone face down and made coffee. It tasted bitter, burned, and perfect. Through the window, Boston woke up completely indifferent to the collapse of my almost marriage. Buses sighed at curbs. Runners passed with headphones. Someone walked a yellow dog in a red sweater. The world did not stop because I refused to be sacrificed on a linen-draped altar. At 6:47, Rosalie arrived in a gray coat, carrying a leather briefcase and 2 croissants. She hugged me once, hard, then sat at my kitchen table. "Start from the moment you turned around," she said. I told her everything. When I played the audio, she did not interrupt. Her face remained still, but her pen stopped moving when Vivienne said girls with dead mothers always cling to approval. When the recording ended, Rosalie removed her glasses. They were not planning a marriage. They were planning an acquisition. I laughed once, hollowly. That sounds exactly right. And Ethan? He knew enough. That is enough. By 8:15, Rosalie had drafted 3 documents: a formal cancellation notice to the venue, a cease and desist to the Reed family regarding harassment or defamation, and a preservation demand requiring them to keep all messages, emails, financial notes, and documents related to my assets. She also called the title company, my bank, and the attorney who had handled my mother's estate. "Your condo is separate property," she said. Your trust assets are separate. Do not sign anything. Do not verbally agree to anything. Do not allow guilt to act as a pen in your hand. My phone buzzed again. Ethan's name lit the screen. Rosalie nodded. Answer on speaker. Say little, I answered. Maya, Ethan said, breathless. Where are you? What is happening? I am home. Why would you send that message? Do you understand my mother is at the venue crying? Guests are already arriving tonight. The photographer is calling me. This is insane. You should ask your mother why I canceled. What does that mean? I played 10 seconds of the recording. Just enough. Vivienne's voice filled my kitchen. After tomorrow, Ethan can finally talk her into adding him to the deed. The silence on his end had weight. Finally, he whispered, Maya, listen to me. That is what I did last night. My mom says things. You know how she is. Yes, I know now. That does not mean I wanted that. Did you know she wanted my condo used for your debt? Another silence. There are silences that hide confusion. This one hid guilt. Maya, he said carefully, we were going to be married. Eventually, it would make sense to combine resources. My mother's inheritance is not a resource. My home is not a resource. I am not a resource. You are twisting this. No, I am finally naming it. His voice hardened. So you are going to destroy 5 years over one overheard conversation? No, Ethan. I am saving the next 50 years because of one honest accident. Rosalie smiled without warmth. Ethan lowered his voice. Please, come to the venue. We can postpone. We can talk privately. Do not make my family look like criminals. Then your family should not discuss crime through a door. They were exaggerating. Your mother said I would fold because my mother is dead. He inhaled sharply. She said that? You didn't know? No. I almost believed the pain in his voice. Almost. Then I remembered the pause when I mentioned the shawl. Ethan, I said, even if you did not say every word, you stood in the room where those intentions lived. I love you. No, you loved access to me. He made a small wounded sound. It used to undo me. Today it only reminded me how trained I was. Rosalie leaned toward the phone. Mr. Reed, this is Rosalie Finch, counsel for Maya Bennett. Further contact should be directed to my office. Ethan whispered, Maya, don't hide behind a lawyer. I answered, I'm not hiding. I'm protected. Protection feels cold only to people who enjoyed your exposure. I ended the call. The first vendor to answer was the hotel coordinator, a woman named Denise, who had spent 4 months helping me choose linens and cake table placement. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was cancellation penalties, insurance clauses, and the strange relief of telling a stranger the truth without explaining the wound. The florist cried when I canceled the white peonies because she had lost her own sister to a bad engagement years earlier. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was how women recognize each other across brief phone calls and unfinished celebrations. I texted my bridesmaids in one group message instead of calling one by one because I knew if I heard Sienna's voice first, I might collapse. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was the difference between sympathy that strengthens you and sympathy that turns you into a spectacle. By 10 that morning, I walked into the hotel where the wedding welcome bags were already stacked behind the concierge desk. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was the ache of seeing your married name printed before it ever becomes real. Vivienne reached the lobby before Ethan did, wrapped in a cream coat and carrying a face built entirely from injured dignity. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was public manipulation, fake tears, and the first time Maya refuses to lower her eyes. Rosalie did not play the whole recording in the lobby, just one clean section that cut through the room like a fire alarm. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was evidence as oxygen and the way liars hate clean air. When I asked for my mother's shawl, Clara rolled her eyes as if the request were childish. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was how heirlooms become witnesses, and how disrespect finally becomes visible. The second surprise arrived from Ethan's former roommate, Jonah, who sent me a screenshot before noon. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was a startup bridge loan presentation listing Maya's condo as future collateral. Rosalie told me to freeze every transfer path connected to Ethan before lunch. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was the strange power of changing passwords while wearing the suit you should never have needed. By evening, the first rumor landed. Maya canceled because Ethan was not rich enough. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was how people who planned to take your money accuse you of worshipping it. Sienna wanted me to burn them down online, but Rosalie advised patience. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was timing, restraint, and the difference between silence and surrender. Over the next 48 hours, we counted every loan I had given the Reed family. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was small emergencies, Venmo notes, tuition help, car repairs, and the arithmetic of being used. 3 days later, I visited the Seaport condo alone for the first time since canceling the wedding. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was sunlight on empty floors and the realization that a quiet room can be a rescued future. The wedding dress stayed in its garment bag like a sleeping accusation. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was releasing beauty from a bad story. The first wire transfer arrived without apology. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was money returning as proof, not healing. At work, the Q4 presentation waited for me as if my private disaster had never happened. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was competence as a rope back into yourself. Rosalie told me that predators often return wearing regret. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was late apologies, strategic remorse, and the need for borders. Ethan appeared outside my building one rainy Thursday, with flowers I had once loved. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was why gifts become props when accountability is missing. Vivienne sent a handwritten letter that smelled faintly of perfume and entitlement. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was the art of apologizing without surrendering superiority. Clara cracked first, not from guilt, but because Rosalie's demand letter threatened her credit. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was fear as the closest thing some people have to honesty. The shawl came back in a courier box, folded badly, with one silver star snagged. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was repairing what others mishandled. I donated the wedding dress to a charity that helped women starting over. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was turning a failed ceremony into someone else's honest beginning. Sienna took me to a cabin in Vermont where the air smelled like pine and wet leaves. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was learning to laugh without explaining why you stopped crying. 2 months later, my director asked me to lead a new division. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was how freedom returns ambition to its rightful owner. I saw Ethan again in a crowded coffee shop near the harbor. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was closure without surrender, apology without obligation. On my mother's birthday, I brought white tulips to the cemetery and wore the repaired shawl. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was telling the dead you finally listened. The final settlement closed with a dull email from Rosalie. All funds received. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was ending not with fireworks, but with a clean ledger. I moved into the condo on a Saturday with 6 boxes, 1 mattress, and no man carrying the future for me. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was how empty rooms can sound like permission. Ethan's last text arrived in spring, short and tired. I hope one day you forgive me. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was forgiveness as a private room nobody can demand entry to. When people ask how I knew I made the right choice, I tell them about the silence after I sent the text. The detail that stayed with me was not the drama. It was peace as evidence. What surprised me most through all of it was how ordinary survival looked. I still had to eat. I still had to wash a coffee mug. I still had to decide whether to return the cake stand deposit and what to do with welcome bags printed with names that would never share a mailbox. The world had not become cinematic just because my life had cracked open. It became practical. Practical meant choosing a locksmith, changing account passwords, canceling joint appointments, and telling my nervous heart that every small action was a vote for freedom. Did I feel brave? Not always. Sometimes I felt like a woman reading instructions during a fire. But I kept reading, and the fire kept losing rooms. Before that week, I believed a relationship became serious when 2 people survived enough years together. I was wrong. A relationship becomes serious when money, grief, property, pride, and fear enter the room, and everyone still chooses honesty. Ethan's family had not chosen honesty. They had chosen timing, pressure, and my need to be loved. So I moved carefully. I answered only what needed answering. I saved messages. I forwarded threats. I kept receipts. I let Rosalie be the wall so I could become a person again. The hotel lobby confrontation became the first story everyone else heard, so I want to tell it exactly. Vivienne came toward me with both hands stretched out, the same theatrical tenderness she had used at engagement parties and holiday dinners. Maya, sweetheart, she said loudly enough for the front desk to hear, whatever you think you heard, please do not ruin your life in public. That was clever. She framed my self-protection as self-destruction before I had spoken a word. Rosalie stepped slightly in front of me. Mrs. Reed, step back. Vivienne ignored her. You are emotional. Brides become emotional. Your mother would not want you to throw away a good man over nerves. The room narrowed. For 1 second, grief flared so hot I thought it would make me reckless. Then I looked at the welcome bags behind the desk, each tied with a blue ribbon, each printed with Maya and Athon in gold letters. I thought of all the labor women pour into celebrations that later get used to trap them. I smiled. My mother, I said, told me to pause when someone pressured me to hand over what protects me. Vivienne's expression flickered. I continued, and your mistake was assuming a dead woman could not still protect her daughter. Denise, the hotel coordinator, looked down quickly, but I saw her eyes shine. Then Rosalie played the clip. Not all of it. Just Vivienne's line about the condo and Clara's line about refinancing it for Ethan's startup. The lobby did not explode. Real humiliation rarely arrives as thunder. It arrives as people suddenly pretending not to be witnesses. Vivienne whispered, that was private. I said, so was my inheritance. Ethan arrived halfway through, hair damp, tie crooked, face pale. He looked at his mother first. Not me. That told me everything I still needed. Maya, he said, please come upstairs. No, 5 minutes? No. He lowered his voice. Do not do this with staff watching. I looked around the lobby. Denise, a bellman, a florist carrying boxes, Rosalie beside me, a few guests frozen near the elevators. You were willing to do it with guests watching tomorrow, I said. You planned to use my grief during a toast. Do not become shy now. His mouth opened, closed. For a moment, I saw the boy I had met 5 years earlier at a product launch, the one who had spilled coffee on his sleeve and laughed at himself. I had loved that boy. Maybe he had existed. Maybe he had been real in fragments. But fragments do not make a husband. Clara appeared behind him in leggings and a sweatshirt, still holding an iced coffee. She looked at Rosalie, then at me, and instantly understood that something legal had arrived. Her confidence drained faster than Vivienne's. Maya, Clara said, we were joking. No, Clara. Jokes do not come with financing strategies. You recorded us without permission. Rosalie said, Massachusetts allows recording when there is no reasonable expectation of privacy from a person standing outside a door, hearing audible conversation in a common access area. But please, let us have that argument formally if you want to be memorable. Clara went quiet. I asked for the shawl. Vivienne claimed she did not know where it was. Clara said maybe a housekeeper moved it. Ethan said he would look. 3 people, 3 answers, 1 family. That was when I understood their entire moral system. Truth was not a value to them. It was a tool used only when convenient, abandoned when costly, and replaced with tone whenever facts grew unflattering. I left the hotel with my name removed from the event board. Outside, a delivery truck was unloading champagne that would never be poured for us. For a second, the absurdity almost made me laugh. There should be a manual for canceled weddings, I thought. Page 1, drink water. Page 2, do not apologize to rental chairs. Page 3, let people be confused. Confusion is not your emergency. When I returned to my apartment, Sienna was waiting with soup, sweatpants, and a face full of fury. She hugged me so hard my ribs protested. I want names, she said. You have names. I want addresses. You have those too. Then I want permission. I laughed for the first time that day. It came out cracked, but real. Denied. She made me sit, eat soup, and hand over my phone while she read messages aloud in increasingly terrible dramatic voices, until even Rosalie laughed. That night did not heal me, but it reminded me that not every witness comes to gossip. Some come with soup and rage on your behalf. The smear campaign began exactly 40 hours later. It started politely, as cowardice often does. A cousin texted that Ethan was devastated and everyone hoped I would reconsider. Then a former coworker messaged, I heard you canceled because you wanted a richer lifestyle. Then a bridesmaid from Ethan's side posted a vague story about modern women confusing independence with cruelty. For an hour, I wanted to respond to everything. I wanted to upload the recording, tag every liar, and let the internet turn their polished family into ash. Rosalie told me to wait. Truth released too early becomes entertainment, she said. Truth released at the right time becomes leverage, so I waited. Instead of defending myself online, I went to work Monday morning. I wore a charcoal dress, pulled my hair back, and presented the quarterly risk dashboard as if I had not spent the weekend canceling a wedding and preserving evidence. At first, people looked at me with the hungry tenderness reserved for women in public embarrassment. By slide 6, they were asking about data. By slide 10, they had remembered I was excellent at my job. My director, Helena, asked me to stay after the meeting. She closed the conference room door and said, "You do not need to explain anything, but I need to know if you are safe." Yes. Do you need time off? No. Do you need the company to redirect access for Ethan Reed? The question stunned me. Ethan worked in an adjacent division and had once used my calendar access for vendor coordination. I had forgotten. Yes, I said. Helena nodded. Done, then she added. For what it is worth, I have watched many people survive private disasters. The ones who return to structure fastest are not cold. They are trying to keep oxygen in the room. I carried that sentence like a cup of water. By Wednesday, Rosalie served the repayment demand. $42,800 in loans, transfers, tuition assistance, emergency payments, and temporary support given to Ethan, Vivienne, Clara, and Ethan's father over 5 years. Every line had a date. Every date had a note. Every note had a receipt. Greed hates paperwork. Vivienne called Rosalie within 20 minutes, screaming loudly enough that I could hear her through the speaker from across Rosalie's office. That money was given in love, Rosalie replied. Then your daughter should not have called it seed funding in a recorded conversation. Vivienne switched to sobbing. Maya is destroying us. No, Rosalie said. She is itemizing you. I wrote that down in my journal later because it made me laugh, and laughter was becoming one of the ways I returned to myself. The first settlement offer was insulting. $5,000 and mutual silence. Rosalie rejected it without asking me. The second offer included a request that I delete the recording. Rosalie laughed for 7 full seconds before saying no. The third offer, delivered after Jonas sent us the startup deck listing marital real estate leverage as a future capital strategy, was much better. Jonas' screenshot changed everything. It proved Ethan had discussed my condo as part of a financing plan before the wedding. He claimed it was hypothetical. Of course he did. Men caught building traps often call the blueprint imaginary. I met Ethan once after that, in Rosalie's office, because the settlement required signatures and he insisted he needed to look me in the eye. Rosalie allowed it because she wanted to watch him try. He looked tired. Not ruined, not transformed, just tired in the way people look when consequences interrupt their self-image. He sat across from me, hands folded, and said, I never wanted to steal from you. What did you want? He swallowed. I wanted us to build something with my foundation, with both our resources. Ethan, your deck used my condo before I agreed. His face reddened. I thought once we were married, it would be natural. There is that word again. Natural. As if consent becomes automatic after vows. He looked down. My mother pushed. She pushed because you leaned. That landed. His eyes filled, and for a moment I saw real shame. I did not rush to comfort it. Shame is a bill. The person who created it should pay first. I did love you, he said. I know. He looked up quickly, hopeful and hurt. I continued. That is what makes it worse. You loved me and still prepared to use me. Love without integrity is just appetite with better manners. Rosalie's pen paused. Even Ethan seemed to stop breathing. Love without integrity is appetite wearing good manners. He signed. The first repayment arrived a week later. $10,000, cold and silent in my bank account. I expected triumph. Instead, I felt steadiness. Money returning did not repair betrayal, but it corrected the direction of one stolen current. I transferred half into savings and half toward extra principal on the condo. Then I made pasta and watched a terrible mystery movie with Sienna, who cheered when the detective arrested the wrong man because she said everyone in the movie deserved inconvenience. Life, stubborn and ordinary, continued. The shawl returned on the 13th day in a brown courier box. No note. No apology. Just my blue cashmere folded badly in tissue paper. One of the silver stars had snagged and loosened, hanging by a thin thread as if even the embroidery had been forced to defend itself. I sat on the floor and held it for a long time. The missing shawl had started everything. It had led me back to the door, kept me still while truth spoke loudly, and given me a reason not to dismiss what I heard. But seeing it damaged made anger rise again, sharp and intimate. They had not simply wanted my assets. They had mishandled the last warmth my mother made with her living hands. I took it to Mrs. Alvarez, a seamstress in my old neighborhood who had altered my mother's dresses for 20 years. She touched the loose star with reverence. "Your mother made this?" "Yes, she had patient hands." "She did." Mrs. Alvarez looked at me over her glasses. "Patient hands do not mean weak hands." I almost cried then. Not in the hotel, not during calls, not when Ethan signed the settlement. In a seamstress's shop smelling of steam and thread, I nearly broke because someone understood the language of stitches. While the shawl was being repaired, I dealt with the dress. It hung in my closet inside a garment bag, occupying more emotional space than physical. For weeks, I avoided looking at it. Then one Saturday morning, I unzipped the bag and realized the dress had done nothing wrong. It was not a symbol of Ethan. It was a symbol of a woman who wanted beauty, believed in ceremony, and deserved honesty. I refused to punish that version of myself. I donated it to a bridal charity that helped women rebuilding after financial abuse. The coordinator, a quiet woman named June, unzipped the bag and gasped. "This is new." "Yes." "Are you sure?" "I am." She touched the lace. "Would you like to leave a note for the bride who receives it?" I wrote, "May you be chosen with honesty, not strategy." No name. When I walked out, I did not feel empty. I felt as if I had released a white bird from a room where it had been blamed for the storm. The second repayment arrived. Then the third. The final wire came with an email from Rosalie. Settled. Closed. No remaining claims unless they defame you again. Closed. I read that word many times. Closure is overrated when people think it requires a final speech, a returned ring, or an apology delivered in rain. Sometimes closure is an email subject line. Sometimes it is a bank balance. Sometimes it is the absence of dread when an unknown number calls. I moved into the Seaport condo the following month. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, empty rooms, and a balcony that smelled faintly of salt when the wind came from the harbor. Ethan had never lived there. Vivienne had never rearranged the kitchen. Clara had never chosen paint colors. Every blank wall felt like proof that I had intercepted my life before it was occupied by people who saw me as square footage. The first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor. At 3 a.m., I woke to moonlight on hardwood and felt panic for one breath, then peace for 10. Sienna helped me build furniture badly. Rosalie brought wine and labeled my filing cabinet evidence of adulthood. Mrs. Alvarez returned the shawl in a white box, the silver star repaired so carefully I could not tell where it had torn. I wore it on the balcony at sunset. "Mom," I whispered into the wind, "I got it back." Not the shawl, not only that, myself. Work expanded around me as if it had been waiting for space. I accepted a director role overseeing operational risk for new product launches. It was demanding, political, occasionally brutal. I loved it. I had spent years using my intelligence to keep peace in rooms that did not deserve it. Now I used it to build things, question assumptions, protect teams, and make decisions without wondering whether my ambition would make Ethan feel small. That was another grief. Realizing how much of myself I had preemptively reduced for a man who still planned to take more. Months later, I ran into him in a coffee shop near the harbor. He looked thinner, bearded, older around the eyes. I felt nothing dramatic. No movie music ache. No desire to throw coffee. Just the strange recognition of a person who had once been central and was now weather from a previous season. "Maya," he said. "Ethan." He held his cup with both hands. "You look well." "I am. I heard about your promotion." "Thank you." He nodded, eyes lowering. "I am sorry. Not for getting caught. For making you unsafe with me." That was the first apology that sounded close to honest. I let it stand in the air. Then I said, "I hope you become someone who never does that again." He swallowed. "Do you forgive me?" There it was. The old request hidden inside new humility. "I am not carrying hatred," I said. "That is what I can offer." He nodded slowly, understanding that it was all he would receive. We left separately. No hug, no final promise, no door reopened. That evening, I visited my mother's grave wearing the repaired shawl. The cemetery was quiet, grass silvered by frost, the city beyond it, humming like a distant machine. I placed white tulips beside her stone and sat on the cold bench. "I almost married a family that thought grief made me easy," I told her. "You warned me. I did not listen fast enough, but I listened in time." Wind moved through the bare branches. I imagined her hands smoothing the shawl collar, her tired eyes fierce beneath illness, her voice saying, Not fast enough is still enough if you turn around before the cliff. For months, I had been grateful for the forgotten shawl, the open door, the careless voices. But sitting there, I understood something deeper. The miracle was not that I overheard them. The miracle was that when I heard the truth, I believed it. I did not negotiate with it until it became harmless. I did not dress it up as misunderstanding. I let it be ugly enough to save me. That is why I am telling this story now, not because I want applause for canceling a wedding, not because I want strangers to hate Ethan, Vivienne, or Clara. Their names matter less than the pattern. The pattern is what matters. The smiling future mother-in-law who compliments your humility while counting your assets. The partner who calls pressure building together. The family that borrows money and calls repayment cruelty. The rumor that punishes a woman for refusing to be useful. If you are listening and something in your own life suddenly feels familiar, pause. Look at the paperwork. Listen to the jokes. Notice who benefits when you stay quiet. Notice who calls you selfish when you protect what keeps you safe. And if this story has stayed with you, take a moment to like this video and follow She Chose Herself. It helps this story reach someone who may be one door, one coat, one forgotten object away from hearing the truth she needs. The last time I saw Vivienne, it was not dramatic. She was outside a department store, carrying a shopping bag, looking smaller without the stage of her townhouse around her. She saw me first. For a second, her face arranged itself into the old smile. Then she remembered there was no audience. Maya, she said. Vivienne, I hope you are satisfied. I thought about that. Satisfied sounded too simple. I was not satisfied that pain had happened. I was not satisfied that 5 years became evidence. I was not satisfied that my mother's shawl had come back damaged. But I was satisfied that my name stayed on my home. I was satisfied that my mother's money stayed protected. I was satisfied that I did not wake beside a man who needed a recording to discover loyalty. I was satisfied that peace had become more familiar than dread. Yes, I said. I am. She had no answer for a woman who refused to explain her peace. I walked away under winter lights, the repaired shawl warm around my shoulders, my keys in my pocket, my future unshared unless I chose otherwise. The city moved around me, indifferent and alive. A bus hissed at the curb. A child laughed near a bakery window. Somewhere another bride was choosing flowers, another woman was ignoring a warning, another mother was sewing love into something small enough to carry. I wanted to reach through time and place that shawl over every woman who had ever been told that protecting herself was an overreaction. I would tell her, your fear of gossip is not worth your home. Your fear of loneliness is not worth your bank account. Your fear of disappointing people is not worth your dignity. A canceled wedding can be a rescued life. When I reached my condo, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The quiet greeted me like a friend. No one asked where I had been. No one measured my usefulness. No one treated my softness as a loophole. I hung the shawl by the door. This time, I did not forget it. And I never forgot myself again. After everything ended, I learned that peace is not a reward someone hands you for behaving well. It is a room you build with locked windows, honest light, and keys that never leave your own pocket. I learned to read kindness more carefully, because real kindness does not rush your signature, borrow your savings, mock your grief, or demand that you prove love by becoming financially exposed. I learned that a family can smile for photographs and still treat a daughter-in-law like inventory, and that recognizing the difference before vows are spoken is not cynicism. It is wisdom. I learned that the body often understands danger before the heart is willing to admit it, and the tightness in your chest may be the last loyal alarm you have. I learned to stop confusing endurance with devotion, because enduring disrespect only teaches disrespectful people that your boundaries are decorative. I learned that documents matter, receipts matter, separate accounts matter, and the most romantic person in the world should still respect a locked drawer. I learned that my mother had not left me only money or fabric or handwriting. She had left me a standard, and standards are inheritance too. I learned that walking away from a wedding does not make you failed. Marrying into a trap because the invitations are printed is the real failure. I learned that apologies are useful only when they arrive without invoices, conditions, audiences, or demands for immediate emotional service. I learned that some people call you heartless when they discover your heart is no longer available for exploitation. I learned that silence can be strategy, But silence should never become self-erasure, and the difference depends on whether you are protecting truth or hiding pain. I learned that the woman who turns around for a forgotten shawl may return home without it, yet still come back carrying proof, clarity, and the rest of her life. I kept walking forward, calm, awake, protected, grateful, steady, unafraid, whole, free.